Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? In this section of Committee of Supply now resumes consideration for the estimates for the Department of Crown Services. As previously agreed, question for the department will be proceeding on a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good to see everyone again. Looking forward to today's session. Last when we left off, we were just talking about some issues relating to the importance of getting clarity on Hydro's financial position, the importance of moving forward with a general rate application. So I'm going to head back into those questions, and I'd like to start by asking the Minister again, and we left off on this question, but I'll ask him one more time here. Can the Minister confirm that his government will be supporting the Public Utilities Board request to have Hydro hand over financial information? Specifically, the Pub has ordered Hydro to hand over their most recent financial forecast. Will the Minister confirm that his government will be supporting that request?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. And you can see my hand okay today, Mr. Chair?
See it perfectly now.
Great. Okay, super. Thank you. And yes, and good morning, everyone. Again, apologize for the delay. Technology. We're all going through this process, and every time we move from one venue to another, it seems to be a bit of a hiccup, but we're through it. And it's great to be back. And good morning, everyone. And good morning to the member from St. James as well. Certainly to your question, absolutely, Manitoba Hydro is working with the PUB with respect to their request, and certainly we would expect that they would continue to move down that process and ensure that the questions that are being asked are being fulfilled.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Good, I very much appreciate that. Could the Minister tell the committee what the most recent and currently used financial forecast is? In other words, was it completed in 2020, 2019 fiscal year? Clarity on that would be appreciated.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Again, thank the member from St. James for the question. And Hydro, as they do every year, has submitted their budget, of course, provided their budget for 21-22. And also, Mr. Chair, the quarterly financials are continuing as well. They're presented publicly. Certainly, the member would have access to those quarterly financial reports as well as we go forward through this fiscal. And certainly, as in any business, it's important to ensure you're managing those quarterly financials in the overall annual budget to ensure you're meeting targets. And certainly nothing has changed with that respect when it comes to reporting.
Member for St. James.
Could the minister provide the committee with some insight into the impact on Hydro's financial state with the sale of Teshmont and the winding down of Manitoba Hydro International?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the question from the member as well. He asked about Teshmont and MHI, and what I'll do is, for the benefit of the committee and Manitobans that are listening online today, we'll work through them separately. As the member knows, Teshmont has been a privately run company for over 30 years here in Manitoba, and we know that during the development and construction of the projects Kiosk and Bipole, Teshmont and Manitoba Hydro worked together in engineering procurement to ensure that Hydro didn't have the capability or the expertise. So they ventured out to Teshmont as a privately owned firm to assist them and partner with them during that process. And the member knows, of course, that there was a 40% stakeholdership in the Teshmont, which they, once the Kiosk and Bipole projects were, the engineering procurement part was clear, they moved away from that partnership, which makes sense. You know, they went into it for a specific purpose, and they got out of it when that purpose was no longer required. So that's good business, and certainly we appreciate that. What wasn't good business, again, was the fact that they actually even had to get involved with the building of Kiosk and Bipole 3. We know that boondoggle will haunt Manitoba ratepayers and generations of Manitobans when it comes to having to pay for that overbuilt Americanized system that the NDP did. Move off of Teshmont to Manitoba Hydro International. We know again that, as we talked about yesterday at length, that Manitoba Hydro is endeavoring to get back to their core business operation. And again, that's their core is very clear to provide green, clean energy at very affordable rates for Manitobans, whether you be residential or industrial. We know that the recent Kiosk and Bipole projects are going to help put that at risk for many years to come, but certainly Manitoba Hydro is going to continue to work in full transparent and lockstep with government to ensure that we can keep Manitoba Hydro, rates affordable, and work towards trying to ensure that we have some path forward. Manitoba Hydro has a path forward of ensuring that they can start to pay down that massive debt that was accumulated under the former government. Again, they're looking at, they tripled the debt in their time in government, and we're looking at upwards of $24 billion in debt. And I can tell the member, and again, folks that are listening online, that currently they haven't even started to pay down the principal mortgage on those two projects. Currently, they're paying the interest only, and thankfully, interest rates have not gone up. My gosh, if interest rates move a half a point, the burden on Manitobans on that excess debt will be the tune of millions and millions of dollars more in interest rates before we even get to tackle the principal investments that Manitobans have been put on the hook on when it comes to Bipole and Kiosk. The member, again, being a former banker, knows it's great if you're able to qualify for a mortgage and you can borrow at a low interest rate, but eventually you need to have a plan to ensure that you can pay down that debt, particularly locking in the interest rates and particularly paying down the principal. We know that if you don't pay down the principal over the course of the time, and interest rates go up, boy, oh boy, look out, or you're in trouble. So certainly Hydro recognizes that, our government recognizes that, and we're looking forward to, again, working with Manitoba Hydro for the betterment of ratepayers in Manitoba to ensure that this never happens again. And we know that sticking to that core business, Manitoba Hydro International endeavored in a number of areas. One was, again, in their international dealings, and we know that there were some dealings that were very, very risky in international markets that, quite frankly, other publicly owned utilities got out of because they realized the risk of making investments in those countries, third world countries in some cases, that there's areas of terrorism and other areas of...
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, we didn't get really much of an answer there. Specifically, what I was looking for was clarity on the financial impact of the selling off of a hydro subsidiary, specifically Teshmont. How did that impact Hydro's financial position? And also the winding down of Manitoba Hydro International, which has made $80 million in profits for Manitoba Hydro ratepayers since its inception. The minister likes to talk about a debt issue, again, which Manitobans can't get any clarity on because his government won't actually allow a general rate application to go forward to allow Manitobans to have clarity on Hydro's financial state because they're relying on obfuscation and continued talk about Hydro's supposedly poor financial position without actually allowing Manitobans to see what's actually happening in the books. So again, I'll ask the minister, can he please provide some clarity in terms of the impact on Hydro's financial state resulting from the sale of Teshmont and the winding down of Manitoba Hydro International?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly appreciate the question again. I'll see if we can move this one along. The member talks about, again, Teshmont, and we know we had a very large discussion, a very lengthy discussion, pardon me, yesterday on core business. And we know that particular to Teshmont, certainly Manitoba Hydro needed some further expertise, so they got involved with Teshmont, which was a privately owned and operated and continues to be today company here in Manitoba. And certainly we understand that, as I mentioned in my preamble in my first answer, that once that need is not required, then Manitoba Hydro moves back to their core, and that's exactly what they've done. And certainly they know best, and unlike the members opposite, we respect the decisions that are made by the board of Manitoba Hydro and their executive team, and we certainly do with respect to what they've done to Teshmont. Again, Manitoba Hydro International, we know that again, and I'll refer back to their arm where they were involved in countries that, quite frankly, other public utilities said, no, look, we're out of here. There's no way we're going to get involved in countries like Nigeria or Honduras or Saudi Arabia or Panama. I mean, there were a number of countries that Manitoba Hydro International had sent employees over. As a matter of fact, they were having employees living almost with security 24/7 in order to do their job because of the risk of threat and terrorism. So good on Manitoba Hydro for recognizing that, and again, protecting Manitoba Hydro employees obviously is number one, and they recognize that as well. So we know that, and the member knows that bringing over Manitoba Hydro International staff, there were no layoffs. They were all offered jobs within the Manitoba Hydro family, which is the right thing to do. And our government is very proud of the fact that over the last 15 months during this global pandemic that we have not had to lay off anybody due to the pandemic. Certainly there are layoffs that would need to take place in areas of government, like when you have to close casinos, and there's temporary layoffs. Or, we understand that. I know that the employees and the unions understood that, and they get it. There's no work, the doors are closed, so we need to obviously have some temporary situations set up. So, I hope that helps the member somewhat. We know that moving the staff over again, they continue to obviously have a good job and protect their families, and in the corporation, of course, working with Manitoba Hydro, and getting back to their core. And we know that their core again is, and I'll reiterate it the entire morning. We've got a couple hours, so I'm more than happy to say it again. Getting back to your core business of providing green, clean energy for Manitobans at affordable rates.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, just for the record, no clear response. It was a very simple question, which was to get clarity on the financial impact, meaning what profits were generated through the sale of Teshmont, our 40% stake. That was an investment in part ownership that we benefited from tremendously. And also the winding down of Hydro International. Well, what's the financial impacts and the expected impacts of losing out on all of the business that this government has decided to shut down? MHI was a golden goose, produced again $80 million in profits over the last many years that it's been in operation. Those are profits that help to keep hydro rates low, that help to pay down hydro debt. And so it's just confusing. The minister is trying to outline a case to hydro getting back to core business, and speaking about this as though it's some clear necessity of some kind, when we know that MHI has been wildly profitable for all of us as Manitobans. I also want to put on the record, because I think it's important, I've spoken to a lot of MHI staff over the last many months, going back almost 8 months now. And I think it's important that the minister know and that this government know that when they reference this supposed lack of responsibility of working in these foreign countries and doing the work that MHI had done, it's a huge insult. It's a huge insult to the individuals that were responsible for managing MHI. It's an insult to all of the hydro professionals that built that business and frankly are quite proud of that. And so this language about, protecting hydro employees, keeping them out of these countries, if the minister had taken the time to meet and learn about MHI, what he would have learned was that the employees of Manitoba Hydro desperately wanted to be assigned to those files. They desperately wanted to work abroad for MHI. It was viewed as an incredible opportunity for development, for growth, and it created a much stronger employee base, many of these employees went back to work directly for Hydro after a stint with MHI working abroad. This was a hugely beneficial undertaking. So I just want to put on the record here that the minister's language, and I know I've heard his government use this as an excuse for why they're shutting down MHI, as though somehow this was some wildly reckless undertaking. That just really reflects on him, and it reflects on his government's lack of engagement with MHI and understanding their business and what they brought to us. So I think that's an important thing to put on the record, just that this government clearly has not done their homework in understanding what value MHI brought to Manitobans. And that's saying nothing, again, about the $80 million in profits that they've generated for us, and that's indisputable. So clearly not going to get an answer from the minister on the financial impact of selling off of Teshmont in the winding down of Manitoba Hydro International. So we'll move on. I'd like to talk a bit about Bill 35 and just learn a bit about some of the things that were put into BITSA here regarding rate increases. And I'd like to just start by asking the minister what discussions took place with Hydro in advance of the 2.9% rate increase that happened in December.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And, again, certainly appreciate, the member is frustrated because of his lack of knowledge on these files, and obviously very partisan comments. But, the pattern of behavior that he exhibits again this morning you know, of insults is simply just a pattern that he needs to move away from, in my view. And I think Manitobans' view. I mean, he has a record of you know, going down that path of personal attacks. He knows that in the sense of when he personally attacked a civil servant, a hardworking civil servant here within government, and continues to project that behavior, and it's shameful, quite frankly. And I'm certainly glad to be able to put that on the record, because he has a pattern of behavior like this that he needs to really pay attention to, because Manitobans won't tolerate it. You know, it's just simply it's shameful behavior. So again, he talks about, and we'll talk a little bit about Bill 35. You know, we've got all morning, so that's great. But I still want to go back to, you know, the false information that the member continues to put on the record about, you know, the profitable Manitoba Hydro International, you know, arms of Manitoba Hydro. Really, you know, again, I want to go back to the risk appetite to support international consulting firm that was just not acceptable to Manitoba Hydro and the Crown Utility and Manitobans who own Manitoba Hydro. We know that Manitoba Hydro, again, has a duty, and I mentioned this before, to protect Manitobans. So the member can say that, you know, colleagues or people that he spoke to at Manitoba Hydro, staff at Manitoba Hydro International, said they enjoyed going international travel and, you know, living abroad and working abroad. Well, that's great. But again, when you put Manitobans in harm's way, that's not good. And Manitoba Hydro recognized that, because under the 20 years or 17 plus years of Manitoba, the NDP leadership, they basically turned a blind eye to this particular wing of the organization at MHI. The geopolitical risks that were involved, the environmental risks, the political uncertainty was a huge risk. You know, I mentioned those countries earlier. I can mention them again for the record. They are in Hansard, and the member can certainly take the weekend to review it. But, you know, the global trade policies, for instance. I mean, there's a reason why other publicly owned utilities moved away from this business, because it, quite frankly, it put employee health and safety at risk. And those are the facts, Mr. Chair, and Manitobans know that. So why the member continues to say that that was a good thing is beyond me. But again, it goes back to that behavior pattern of his. You know, he would rather put falsehoods and misinformation on the record to drive his political agenda, and that's just wrong. And again, I'll move back to how important it is and how Manitoba Hydro is moving away and back to their core business to ensure that they can continue to provide their core services to Manitobans. So I wanted to put that on the record, Mr. Chair. I know I'm going to run out of time, but certainly what I'll do is I'll just end it there, and I'll allow the member to again ask this question regarding Bill 35, and we'll endeavor to give him some answers on that.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is quite a tangled web being woven by the minister. Had a hard time following the logic there, but we're going to forge on. What discussions took place with Hydro in advance of the 3% rate increase in December?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the member knows full well that the Minister of Finance is in estimates this morning, and certainly if he has his colleague ask the minister that question on Bill 35, I'm sure I'd be more than happy to you know, assist with an answer on that question. Being in estimates, so provide that opportunity for the member to get an answer.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think it's very reasonable for Manitobans to expect that the minister responsible for Crowns and for Manitoba Hydro would have some understanding as to what discussions happen with Hydro regarding that rate increase. So maybe I'll ask a slightly different question, and this is one that I think, I hope he's able to answer, which is how did his government know that a 2.9% increase was needed in the BITSA without having any clarity on Hydro's financial status?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank the member from St. James for the question, because it gives me an opportunity to remind him that under the NDP, hydro rates increased an average of over 40%, which obviously puts a real strain and a burden on Manitoba ratepayers, and obviously there's concern on that. And moving forward, again, the Minister of Finance is in estimates, and that's great. But it does give me the opportunity to finish what we were putting on the record yesterday. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so I just again wanted to, for Manitobans online this morning, finish the joint letter from Manitoba Hydro and Manitoba Public Insurance in support of Bill 35, the Public Utilities Ratepayer Protection and Regulatory Reform Act. So I will endeavor to do that now, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to finish this and get it on the record so it's on hand for Manitobans to see the collaboration between Manitoba Hydro and Manitoba Public Insurance and the government that has not been seen in 2 decades under the NDP. So again, and I quote, more importantly, the changes will increase the efficiency and regulatory process and lower costs to Manitoba Hydro customers. Past costs of applications for Manitoba Hydro have been twice the average of other Canadian utilities on a per customer basis. Over the last 10 years, the average cost of electric and natural gas regulation by the Public Utilities Board was approximately $10 million a year. Approving a series of annual electricity rates changes at 5-year intervals will provide better rate predictability and cost certainty for all our customers, making it easier for households and businesses to budget energy costs. Our government have consistently told us this is important for them. The predictability is further enhanced by Bill 35's proposed cap on general electricity rate increases of 4%, or twice the rate of inflation, mitigated the risk of rate shock in any particular year. So again, that rate shock is it's such a fear, especially for Manitobans, ratepayers, whether you be commercial or industry or residential, because look, we know that $200 in an increase in a hydro bill would be a real challenge, especially now during the pandemic. So I'll continue with this. Another couple of paragraphs for the record, Mr. Chair. The 5-year interval for setting rates will also provide revenue certainty for Manitoba Hydro, allowing the utility to more effectively plan for the long-term maintenance and investments in the province's electricity system needed to safely and reliably maintain services to our customers. Bill 35 provides a plan for Manitoba Hydro to restore its financial health by establishing debt-to-equity targets and the role of these targets in the rate setting process, the legislation will ensure Manitoba Hydro can generate sufficient revenues needed to make steady progress toward debt reduction, prepare for the evolving energy landscape, and continue to be reviewed by credit rating agencies and being financially self-sustainable. Mr. Chair, we know that needs to be in the window for our Crown corporations to be self-sustainable for the long haul to protect Manitoba ratepayers. Again, for the record, another couple of paragraphs, Mr. Chair. The additional requirement for Manitoba Hydro to develop a long-term integrated resource plan, or IRP, recognizes that all Manitobans should have the opportunity to provide input via consultation into major energy resource development in the province. This is reinforced in the legislation by expanding the scope of the Public Utilities Board to include the review of any proposed new major generation station or transmission project, any new power purchases from Manitoba producers, and any new export contracts. Bill 35 represents a considered review of current regulatory rate setting model in Manitoba and recommends needed changes that successfully balance the importance and independent regulatory oversight with the best interests of the customers we serve. Manitobans currently enjoy some of the lowest electricity rates and auto rates in Canada, and Bill 35 will help preserve the cost advantage in years ahead. Yours sincerely, Jay Graywall, President and CEO of Manitoba Hydro, Eric Herblin, President and CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance. Very, very pleased to put that on the record, Mr. Chair. I know the member from St. James appreciates that input. To ensure that he knows.
Time is up. I'm just consulting with the clerk here. Just 1 second, please.
I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think it will surprise Manitobans to know that Hydro would like to maximize revenues to the greatest degree possible, as the minister has outlined in that letter of support for Bill 35, which will raise rates significantly at levels that at this point are likely have never before been seen. What we're more worried about, and clearly as the minister has demonstrated here, what they're not worried about is the interests of regular Manitobans. We're worried about the interests of everyday Manitobans who are going to see significantly higher energy costs as a result of Bill 35. The minister should know that industrial power users across the province wrote a letter and came together and stated their own concerns with the direction that this government is going with Bill 35. So not only are regular Manitobans worried about where this bill is taking us, but even our biggest power users, our business sector, is hugely concerned about it. So yes, the Hydro as a corporation does, of course, support this bill. It will help to increase revenues for them and maximize revenues at levels that we haven't seen to some degree in terms of dollars and revenues they'll be generating through rates. But we're more worried about the interests of Manitobans, which is why I asked the minister how his government went about setting a 2.9% rate increase without any form of process through the Public Utilities Board. So I'll ask him again one more time. I'll give him a chance to tell Manitobans why that rate increase was fairly determined, why they knew that 2.9% was the amount required to help Hydro service its debt, to meet costs that were in place. How did they come to 2.9%? Or was it just set at the cabinet table without any type of analysis at all?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, with respect to the question on rates, Mr. Chair, and I'll again refer to my colleague and the Minister of Finance, who's currently sitting in estimates. Certainly, he would be best set to discuss that particular issue. But what I will do is the member talks about obviously about Manitobans and certainly why we in particular are concerned about Manitoba Hydro. Well, I can tell you why we're concerned, because of obviously the mistakes that were made under the former NDP government. Would the member be willing to share why the former NDP government essentially continued to build a mega boondoggle project like Kiosk, when there were clear signals during the process to take an off-ramp simply because we knew that costs of power, export power sales were falling drastically. We knew that the American states, particularly the northern states, were fracking more. They were dealing with their own energy, again, supporting their own economies by buying from home. We know that agenda was out there. So maybe the member could take a few minutes just to explain why they continued to spend over $1.2 billion in sunk costs into those projects without even having approval from the PUB going forward. So, I mean, just incredible. He talks about decisions being made at the cabinet table. Well, I can tell you that none of those projects likely even got to the cabinet table. They never got to the PUB. They never got to Treasury Board. They never got to any of the due processes that are put in place to protect Manitobans, Mr. Chair. So certainly we'll take no lessons from the member when it comes to due process and governance, Mr. Chair. But certainly the member talks about maximizing revenue, and we agree, and I'm glad, probably one of the only points this morning that we do agree. But we know that we need to maximize revenue, and Hydro needs to maximize its revenue. But that doesn't necessarily have to be driven by one entity, and the member knows, you know, again, maybe he doesn't, but, you know, when you're in business, you have to diversify. And, you know, you can't rely on simply one revenue stream or one revenue source. So what do? You go out to the market and you procure new customers, whether you know, whether it be in different fields or different areas. But you do your research, you understand what market is available out there, what market share you could obtain, what those numbers would look like at the end of the day, to better the you know, in this case Manitoba Hydro. But you know, certainly revenue generation is done in many ways from many different companies. And that's what's called as diversification. And Manitoba Hydro, again, is reviewing those options, and again, getting back to the core. And with respect to building revenue, you know what? They can certainly, and they know they're going to go out and they're going to procure more contracts, whether that be domestic sales or potentially, maybe, hopefully, you know, moving power further east and west to procure that way and build up revenue in that sense as well, while protecting rates locally here, because we know that that wasn't a focus of the former NDP government, protecting rates for domestic use here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba. We know that deferred maintenance on areas, not only in our crowns, but right across core government, whether it be roofs and HVACs on schools, you know, which are important, whether it's upgrading our hospitals. You know, these are things that have been ignored for far too long. So we're really going into the global picture here, and I hope the member appreciates that, because really, when the NDP is accustomed to working in silos, I know it's difficult to look outside the box, but hopefully he'll get there. I think he will. I've got confidence he will. He'll get there. But he talks about industries like MyPug and the large industrial users. Absolutely, working in collaboration with them is important, not only with Manitoba Hydro, but with government.
The Honourable Minister's time is up.
He should know on what basis he's asked Manitobans to pay another 2.9% for their hydro rates. It's ludicrous that he can't answer that question. Just help us understand, Minister, on what basis did your government raise hydro rates by 2.9% on Manitobans at a holiday time in the middle of a pandemic?
Exactly what that would look like based on the over $23 billion of debt burden that the NDP have left Manitobans when it comes to Manitoba Hydro. Certainly, we know that currently interest rates are low. All signals are pointing towards interest rate hikes coming in the near future. And we know also, as I mentioned earlier, and the member knows that. So I've got to do. I got to share this with the member too. 1%, 1 point in interest rates, which again is very conceivable, could very well happen within the next 12 to 18 months. Even though we're in a pandemic, some other jurisdictions are coming out faster, and we know that inflation. But look, one percentage point on that $23.3 billion burden that the NDP put on Manitoba ratepayers at Manitoba Hydro, $22 million plus in additional interest that we will have to pay. Manitoba Hydro, the owners of Manitoba Hydro, customers will have to pay that. So again, I think it's, the member talks about rates and interest rates, and he talks about, I talk about diversification, and he talks about not understanding what diversification is in business. When he mentions that, when I had commented on the fact that we go out and look for different ways to raise revenue within our core business, that's exactly what we do. So we have a core business, and that's providing electricity. And if Manitoba Hydro decides that they want to provide electricity to customers under their core mandate, they go ahead and do that. They sell electricity. An abundance of electricity that we have, they can go ahead and sell it and ensure that we protect Manitoba ratepayers. So I don't know. I don't think I'm missing anything. Maybe I misunderstood the member's question or comment, but again, if we have a product to sell, we sell it. And diversification is diversifying and finding a different customer base. That's part of diversification. Doesn't mean you necessarily sell to one particular entity. You could sell to a different entity. So you can sell to a commercial purchaser, or sell to a residential purchaser, or vice versa, whatever. I mean, the member knows that. So I also wanted to, so I will move it over to the member from St. James.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure in what universe just finding new export contracts for our energy would be called diversification, but I digress. One thing I just want clarity on, the minister had mentioned that we're only paying down the interest, we're not touching the principal. Can he clarify, is that the case that on the bipole and kiosk projects, we are currently only paying interest and not the principal as he stated? Can he confirm that?
The honourable minister.
Yes.
The honourable member for St. James.
You know, the minister was speaking about interest rates and their potential for them changing, and that is, of course, a concern. He will, of course, know that debt was locked in for long periods of time, and that immediate fluctuations in interest rates potentially could impact us in the longer term, but we have locked in a lot of our debt at historically low rates. But if there is, you know, such a concern about where things will go, it would be helpful if the minister would encourage his government to release an integrated financial forecast. Because at this point, everything he's sharing is essentially fiction to Manitobans, because we don't have any basis, and frankly, he and his government don't have any basis to make these comments. This is just the minister's sort of off-the-cuff calculator work that he's doing there at his desk. Manitobans don't have anything to base this information on. If he really wants to make a coherent argument that there are risks here that we should all know about, he would support putting out an integrated financial forecast so that we could have some transparency around Hydro's actual financial situation and the path ahead. I mean, you're making an argument in favor of doing that. So I would argue that the minister should, if he is really so confident in what he shared, he should be encouraging his government and Hydro to release that. So all of us can have, you know, actual verification of the information that he likes to throw around. Right now, it's nothing more than just hearsay from a minister, and we don't really have any ability to have confidence in that. It's very problematic just from a fairness and a perspective of ensuring that Manitobans can have confidence in knowing that their government isn't overcharging them for power. That's the role of the Public Utilities Board. It's there to protect us. It protected us when this government came forward with a 7.9% rate increase request, and they walked away with only half of that. The Public Utilities Board protected us. They protected us from overpaying from a government that was trying to overcharge Manitobans for hydro rates. And again, they're doing it. They've raised, he won't, it's clear he's not going to answer the question about the 2.9% increase and how they calculated that. So Manitobans will again continue now to have no idea whether or not that rate increase was ever needed. He hasn't answered that question. And this just seems to be the pattern, is ensuring that Manitobans remain in the dark. So all these claims about, you know, Hydro's finances, interest rates, none of it is meaningful until Manitobans actually have something to base that on, rather than just conjecture from the minister. I'd like to ask given that they put that rate increase in BITSA without any clarity on whether or not that was needed, does the minister anticipate another rate increase will be brought forward this year?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'll just move on. I don't need to get into a big back and forth with the member. I mean, he likes to pick fights, so I like to provide clear and transparent information, and that's exactly what I'll continue to do. So again, back to Bill 35, and I'm sure the members read Bill 35. Bill 35 again sets targets for Manitoba Hydro to reach its financial target of a debt to equity of 70-30 by 2039-40. So when we talk about debt to equity, again, the member knows how important it is to maintain a strong debt to equity. Certainly about his partisan rhetoric, but we know that, and he knows darn well that this is the reality. That debt to equity needs to be tackled. And that's exactly what Manitoba Hydro is endeavoring to do. And that's what Bill 35 will help chart the course for that to happen. Under the 35 regulatory framework, Rates will be subject to rate caps and provide certainty for customers. Well, the member talks about rates fluctuating and uncertainty. Well, under the NDP, that's exactly what they got was rate uncertainty, 40% increase. I mean, I don't know where the member gets off arguing that interim rate of 2.9 is an issue, but again, I'll leave that to my colleague as well. Certainly, he's probably had that question already. But the rate certainty will help customers plan for future. Again, to minimize those rate shocks that could happen. So, I don't see where there's a downside here. The member seems to find a downside because of his partisan view, but, general rate application review process under Bill 35 reinforces the PUB's role. So if we reinforce the role of the PUB and make it stronger, is that not a good thing for Manitobans, to protect Manitobans on a go forward, where especially when they have a large project like a kiosk or bipole capital investment come to the table, well, the PUB will actually have, and Manitobans will have more say in whether that project should move forward and whether it should.
To previous rate increases under the last NDP government, I'll remind the minister, all of those increases happened through the Public Utilities Board. So Manitobans had the benefit of knowing that a third party was reviewing these rate increase requests and ensuring that we were not overpaying. I don't know why the minister finds that hard to understand. A 2.9% rate increase, which is a significant increase that this government put in December, was done without any clarity on whether or not it was actually needed. That should scare Manitobans. It does scare a lot of Manitobans. I don't know why that's not bothersome to the minister. Manitobans deserve to know that what they're paying for hydro is fair. To that point, the minister talks about debt to equity ratio. Again, if he had engaged with MyPug, if they engaged with stakeholders around the province, they would know that a debt to equity ratio being applied to a Crown corporation is a completely different question than applying that to a private business. It's not the same thing. When Manitoba Hydro increases or improves its debt to equity ratio and it increases that equity number, they're putting money in reserves. They're taking money out of Manitobans' pockets, they're putting it in reserves, and those reserves don't in any way respond to a real financial risk that Hydro is facing. That's all that's happening. So this whole question about this bill, that somehow this is going to help us get us to this better position, it's built on a dubious foundation about getting us to a debt to equity target that is founded on a ratio here that doesn't really necessarily apply to a government organization. I only say this, not to get too into the weeds, but to be clear about the fact that that is not something that should be pointed to when we're thinking about a Crown corporation. And in fact, all the minister's talking about here is helping us to improve a ratio that ultimately is about taking money out of Manitobans' pockets and putting it into hydro reserve bank accounts. I don't see why that's a good plan that's in the best interest of Manitobans. Manitobans deserve clarity on what basis their hydro rates are being increased, which is why they deserved an independent review prior to this government's last rate increase. And so my last question was asking the minister whether or not he knew if another rate increase was coming this year. He didn't answer that. I would like to know what the minister feels qualifies him and his cabinet to determine rate increases.
The Honourable Minister. Can you hear me? The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister, can you hear me? We got technical difficulties here.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, we called you a few times already.
Okay. You got me?
Proceed.
Okay, I'll assume you do, because I didn't hear that.
I say you can proceed. We haven't heard you about 3 times, so we were calling you about 3 times, so I'm not quite sure if there's a technical difficulty, but go ahead, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly again, I won't take the bait on the member from St. James cast on that one, but you know, we know that debt to equity matters to moneylenders. We know that. The member knows that. We know that 3 downgrades under the former NDP government have put us in a dark spot, and certainly when it comes to our debt, because of the burden that was put on Manitobans, in particular Manitoba ratepayers. So I guess we'll agree to disagree on that, but you know, certainly $10 million a year spent on general rate applications is $10 million that can be put back on kitchen tables of Manitobans. So Bill 35, again, you know, calls for multi-year, upwards of 5 years, of course, which again would provide almost $40 million in savings to Manitoba ratepayers based on the current cost burden on annual GRAs. Other jurisdictions are doing it. Why isn't Manitoba? Certainly, I would expect the member would agree that if we can find $40 million somewhere, that's a good thing. That's a good news story for Manitoba ratepayers. So, and to avoid further downgrades, obviously. You know, we know that downgrades cause interest rates to go up. And an hour and a half ago, we were talking about interest rates. And we know that what the effect of a half a point is on $23 billion worth of debt. It's 11 million bucks. We know that 1% is in excess of $22 million more in interest payments without even paying down the principal. So, you know, certainly Bill 35 is going to protect Manitoba ratepayers for the long haul, and again, it will help ensure that Manitobans have a clear sight into the Manitoba Hydro to ensure that you know, big projects like Kiosk and Bipole 3 don't happen again without proper oversight and inclusion by Manitoba.
I would like to ask the minister about section 15.22C seems to open the door to the resale of electricity to private resellers without limit. Does the minister agree that there are risks here?
The Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And again, I was guilty of scratching my nose. I'll get back to you shortly.
I apologize for the misunderstanding.
Thank you.
The Honorable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd ask the member from St. James to provide a little bit more clarity. Again, we want to provide the member with a response, and I certainly want to ensure that we're responding to the right aspect. 15.22C, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, section 15.22C
Member for
is...
St. James, I'm sorry, I do need to recognize you first for the sake of Hansard. So the member for St. James, please go ahead.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Section 15.22C is quite self-explanatory in terms of the section of the legislation that we're referencing here. That section seems to open the door to the reselling of electricity. Now, arguably, it seems that the legislation has positioned this to allow for the resale of electricity for the purpose of electric vehicle charging. However, there seems to be some open-endedness to this. And what I'd like to know from the minister is whether or not he perceives any risks in allowing that door to remain as open as it is, where we could have a situation where other Manitoban businesses or entities could begin reselling hydro, which, as the minister would know, is not permitted under the current Manitoba Hydro Act.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, the member from St. James, in his first part of that question, referred to Bill 35 and then referred to section 15.22C. 15.22C is actually in the Manitoba Hydro Act. So just to be clear, and we can check Hansard on that, but that's why we're having a little difficulty looking.
Minister, it seems your camera has turned off, so that means I cannot see you raise your hand or recognize you to speak. If you could turn your camera back on, that would be great. The member for Concordia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I understand we're having some technical difficulties. Obviously, we'd like to get things back online as quickly as possible, but in the meantime, can I ask for a short recess of the committee until the minister can get their technology figured out?
It does appear we are having technical challenges. Is it agreed to recess briefly so that we can get the minister back up and running and resume the meeting, hopefully in a very few minutes? Agreed? Agreed. Committee is recessed. Please watch your cameras. As soon as the minister is back on, we will resume. Welcome back, Minister. If you could zoom in, that would be much appreciated. And please give me a wave when you're ready to answer the question. I believe we were waiting for you. And committee, the recess has ended. We have the minister back. So the committee is back on. And as soon as I have a signal, I'll acknowledge the Honourable Minister to respond to a question from the member for St. James.
Okay, we seem to be having an issue in the chamber. Can you tell me?
Hi, everybody. Apologies again. We seem to be having an issue in the chamber. Could someone give me a nod if you can hear each other? You can hear each other. We can't hear a thing here in the chamber. So my apologies again. We're going to recess until we've got this sorted out. And just as soon as that happens, we will resume. Mr. Lamont, could I ask you please to say something into your mic so that if we can hear you, then we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
Okay, we've got. Minister.
Can you hear Adrian?
Yeah, Minister, we can hear you, but we cannot see you. So we do need both to be functioning in order to proceed. Okay, and now I can see you. And Minister, are you ready to respond to the question for the member, from the member?
Just getting some information for the member. Just now that we're up and running again, we were focusing on that. So give me a minute and I'll signal when we're ready.
Okay. Committee is back in session, and we have sound and visual working. As soon as we have a signal from the minister, we'll hear from the minister on the question from the member for St. James.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Oh, a new chair, or the old chair. Welcome back. And I see we have, I just wanted to appreciate Mr. Lamont is on the line and cleanly shaven. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to the member for that question. And again, this Bill 35 is, I know the member had said that I was the minister advancing Bill 35 when I'm not. Bill 35 is being advanced by the Minister of Finance. But certainly, I know there's lots more to talk about this morning, but certainly the provision in Bill 35 was created to enable the ever-changing energy environment. Again, that we know that things are changing, even even the way we do business, as we know, is changing. So this will enable the ever-changing energy environment on a go-forward basis.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Does the minister perceive risks in including that in the legislation of any kind?
The Honourable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and certainly that would be the main reason why this is going to be regulated, to ensure that risks, look, there's risks in everything, but to mitigate them, that's exactly why we're putting it into that process.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
The minister will agree that including provisions in Bill 35 that could allow for the private resale of electricity, perhaps from apartment owners or condo owners outside of hydro being in control of that direct relationship could create scenarios where Manitobans are forced to overpay for power, which of course we're currently protected from thanks to the Manitoba Hydro Act and the way it's currently written. The minister just stated on the record that the reason they've included it is to protect Manitobans in some way. Can you just clarify, does he perceive this open-ended opportunity that this bill will create to resell electricity outside of hydro needing to be a direct reseller? Does he perceive risks at all that might come as a result of that inclusion of that provision in Bill 35?
Minister. Okay. The Honourable Minister.
Thanks again. We're talking about a bill that's being led by another minister, so I certainly don't. I know he's in currently the minister's in estimate. So, but I would say again, as I said earlier, this is going to be subject to regulation. Again, that's something that will protect on a go forward. And to the other question is no, I don't anticipate any concerns.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
I would propose to the minister that there are serious concerns with this provision being included in the bill, because it would fundamentally alter the potential relationship between Manitobans and how they get their power. If this bill is used by condo owners to start reselling electricity to their tenants at hugely inflated prices, that's a concern. That is a huge concern. That should be a really big concern for the minister. I'm going to move on because now we spent 20 minutes on this question, and unfortunately I haven't been able to get much clarity, but I think it's important to put on the record that the minister doesn't seem concerned about that fundamental change to the Hydro Act, which will potentially create real risk for Manitobans. Earlier he'd stated, he said on the record that there are $10 million a year costs for when the pub does their GRAs. This is something he stated on the record. Can the minister provide with clarity the estimated costs for the pub last fiscal year and the year prior?
I'm just actually going to say this as a chair. When we're doing specified bills that are going to be, looking at more detailed of the bill that is in the House right now, going to committees, we should be looking at more general, broader questions about the estimates of the department, not so much going into details of the actual bill. That's still going to be going into committee or second reading. And so the understanding here should be that we should be looking at more of a general prospect of the department, not the actual specifics of the bill. And that can be these questions can be asked in more detail in the committees when the bill goes to committee. So just the honourable member for Concordia.
I appreciate the guidance from the...
On a point of order, the honourable member for Concordia.
I appreciate the guidance from the chair on the point of order. As whip, I've been trying to spread my time between committee rooms this morning and had some opportunity to be in room 255 with the Families Minister, where the minister spent considerable time talking about Bill 72. And at that time, when we raised the point of order, it was ruled on by the clerk and the chair in that room that because this was a global discussion, that under the rules as set out for estimates, it was certainly possible for any member to talk about anything they would like with relation to the regards to the department. So not to certainly want to question the guidance of the minister. I think it's good or of the chair. It's good guidance. But I just wanted to share with committee that was the ruling that was shared with us in 255 under the guidance of the clerk there.
I want to thank the member from Concordia on the point of order. But the thing is, when it comes to the actual bill, the specifics of the bill, it should be, again, go back to committees at stage. Here, the thing is, when it comes to the general aspects of the department in general, it is a global manner that we're going through here, but at the same time, we're going really major into the detail of the bill. So we're going to have the clerks have a discussion about what before the next estimates process. Okay. So, the honourable minister, are you able to? Are you ready, or do you want some more time?
More time, thank you.
Okay, thanks. The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, it's our understanding from Manitoba Hydro that the average general rate application is approximately $10 million a year, and certainly that's money that could be saved for the ratepayers of Manitoba Hydro.
The honourable member for St. James.
If the minister endeavor to provide the exact amounts.
Honorable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the question from the member. And again, I would like to ask the member, we'd take this question under advisement and certainly have the opportunity to get back to him at a later date.
The honourable member for St. James.
Appreciate that the minister has committed to getting that information back to us. I think there's strong reason to suspect that $10 million a year does not even remotely come close to the actual costs that are spent on a yearly basis on GRAs. And I think it's important Manitobans have clarity on that information. Going back to a question that's sort of disconnected from the current flow of our conversation, I'd like to ask the minister, has his department or any officials from Manitoba Hydro been in conversation with Excel Energy in Minnesota regarding new contracts or expanding or increasing current contracts?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly appreciate the question from the member. And the member would know this, I'm sure, that discussions between Manitoba Hydro and XL Energy are commercially sensitive, of course, naturally, and again, and confidential and are subject to non-disclosure agreements. So the NDAs play an important role. I certainly don't. We wouldn't be interfering in that process, and I certainly would respect it. And I'm sure the member from St. James would respect an NDA as well. But also too, as well, going back to his last comments about putting fear in Manitobans about $10 million, approximately $10 million a year in annual GRAs, without him having any facts in front of him when we've endeavored to provide information on that question is shameful. And again, an example of this member's behavior. We said that we would do what we can to get the information, and that's exactly what we'll do. And but to put that fear out there amongst Manitobans is again shameful. But again, a picture of this particular member's behavior. So certainly, I hope that he reflects on that. While I have the opportunity as well, I just wanted to share with the member from St. James regarding a Manitoba Hydro subsidiary called Meridian Power. I'm sure the member would be aware of it. If not, certainly he can look it up, or we'll help provide him with information as we have throughout this Committee of Supply process. But essentially, in Manitoba Hydro's annual report in 2007, under the former NDP government, again states in the process of being Meridian Power is in the process of being wound down by Manitoba Hydro. Meridian Power was formed in 1998 to distribute large horsepower single-phase motors and battery-free power protection systems for industrial and commercial applications. And Mr. Chair, the member may know or may not, but I'll share this with him. In 2006-07 fiscal, Meridian Power's assets were written down in the total amount of approximately $1 million. Manitoba Hydro will continue to support Meridian's technology and products with corporate expertise and resources. Sounds like a familiar process that was done under the former NDP government in 2007 when it came to looking back at perhaps going back to core operations of Manitoba Hydro, similar to what Manitoba Hydro is trying to do now with respect to Manitoba Hydro International. So certainly this is an example of Manitoba Hydro looking at this under the previous NDP government. I would assume that the member would be aware of it, but wanted to make sure that this wind down of Meridian Power under the guidance and under the NDP government, former NDP government in 2007-07 fiscal was wound down. So certainly we appreciate Manitoba Hydro continuing to ensure that they manage their core business for the betterment of all Manitoba ratepayers. Certainly in the fact that we're having to deal with billions and billions of dollars of debt put on Manitoba ratepayers by the former NDP government.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to be ceding the remainder of my time to my colleague from St. Boniface, but before doing that, I just wanted to put on the record, because I think it's important for future readers of Hansard or anyone else who looks back at today and even Wednesday or prior engagement and estimates, that the minister responsible for Crowns here has taken the maximum amount of time between each question, often 5 minutes to respond, to provide non-answers that frankly are an embarrassment. And the minister should be ashamed of his performance today and on Wednesday. Instead of answering questions, he's resorting to baseless attacks on me, as his colleagues do on other, my own NDP colleagues throughout our caucus. That's their strategy, instead of focusing on the questions at hand. Manitobans don't have many opportunities to get accountability from this government. This is one of the few venues for us to be able to do that. And he's completely wasted that opportunity to help Manitobans understand what is happening on this file. So that's very regrettable. I wanted to have that on the record, and I'll now cede my time to the member for St. Boniface. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the minister. I know he noticed that I had shaved. Normally, when I see somebody dress up like this, I ask them if they're going for a job interview. I'm not, just so we'll get that out of the way. First, we know time is short, so if the minister can't answer right away, if you could just commit to getting the answer to me later, that would be great. Now, the first question is on MPI. I want to refer to something that came up with MPI more than a year ago, which I think it may have been misinterpreted, and I think the minister may be surprised to hear that I think the government may actually have been painted unfairly in a bad light. Because MPI at one point sought a legal ruling on political input into its operations. And I think this was being perceived as being a red flag because people thought, well, this is, MPI is so worried about political interference. When in fact, what may have been happening, and the minister doesn't have to confirm this, I'm putting this out there, but the MPI, a publicly owned crown corporation, was actually looking to make decisions, even if it meant completely defying or ignoring government. Now, I've often spoken of the importance of an arm's length relationship between crowns and government, but it appears to me that MPI wasn't interested in an arm's length relationship. They were looking to completely sever the relationship and to go rogue, and so that's one of my concerns. But I recognize the difficult balance that government, crown, and PUB each has a role to play, and no player can go rogue. So, in the last couple of months, we've raised concerns about the treatment of collision shops, but it is more broadly about MPI, because as a government-granted monopoly, it has the power to put people in and out of business, and that's a power that needs to be very tightly controlled. But I've heard from brokers as well as collision shops say that they're concerned because if you compare MPI to Saskatchewan, MPI has somehow managed to have higher rates, but pays brokers and collision shops less, as well as having lower payouts as compared to Saskatchewan. And my concern is that MPI's current tactics can mean that dozens of collision shops and possibly brokers could be out of business, especially in rural Manitoba. So I'll ask the minister, would the government consider asking MPI or directing MPI to consider setting a service standard, a certain level of service standard that they're expected to provide Manitobans? Because while MPI exists for MPI, we're here to represent all Manitobans. We don't want to see MPI just benefiting at the cost of collision shops, brokers, or Manitobans will have to pay more to get services. So is telling MPI or having the government publicly direct MPI to set a service standard something the minister or the government would consider? And I'll say right away, I hope the answer is yes.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member from St. Boniface for joining the discussion now this afternoon. I know he's been online for a while and been waiting patiently, and certainly appreciate that. And also wanted to point out too, as well, I appreciate the member's tone and respect for this process as well. And certainly, I know that we can continue to have a discussion in the time we have left in a respectful manner, unlike the member from St. James, where we know that he always reverts back to bullying his way through the process. So thank you to the member from St. Boniface for that, for those opening comments as well, and the question. So certainly, we know that, as you mentioned, the member mentioned, that there, over the last 2 decades under the NDP, there was a lot of government interference when it came to our crown corporations. And MPI was not devoid of that interference. We know that as well. We know that the NDP had a history of what we call raid, parade when it comes to election times. Cycles are 4 years, as we know. As a matter of fact, I go back even when they were 3 years, when I was first elected in 1998, when we had 3-year mandates under the former legislation. We changed that in 2000 to 4 years. But I can tell, the member that the NDP would every election year and that cycle would dig into the MPI piggy bank and provide Manitobans on the eve of an election a healthy check out of that. So certainly we're pleased again to form government with a with the largest majority ever in 2016 and another full and large majority in 2019, and continue, in my respect as Crown Services Minister, to ensure that we have an open and transparent, accountable, and aligned relationship with our Crown corporations. And to that point, and to your point, the member from St. Boniface, moving into legislation is the way to tackle some of these concerns, and we have. And we thank the government, or we thank MPI for working with us on Bill 15. And they understand that an independent dispute tribunal gives Manitobans an option outside of the MPI monopoly on making decisions. So exactly to the member's point, that's what we're doing in collaboration with MPI by introducing and passing Bill 15. It's unfortunate that we didn't get all party support on that bill, but fortunately, again, Manitobans put us in a position to ensure that we can help protect and protect Manitobans, Manitoba ratepayers, and MPI in particular, their ratepayers in this case, and that's exactly what we were able to do with Bill 15. And again, as we go forward, we continue to have discussions with our Crown corporations and again with MPI to ensure that Manitobans have more say, much like Bill 35 through Manitoba Hydro and the Public Utilities Board. We want to strengthen it, give Manitobans more say during the process. And the member knows that building Bipole 3 and Kiosk was the wrong thing to do. They didn't engage Manitobans. They didn't